Hello, Gnome team, parents and students. It's Mr. H on a Friday afternoon right before Labor Day weekend to give you a little bit of a social studies update. So here we go. First of all, we just finished our survival game yesterday, dealing with the three major things that human beings need to survive. You need water, number one, shelter, number two, food, number three. And the game was a rousing success. You might have heard stories last night as your students came home, both success stories and absolute failure stories. There might have been some hurt feelings as well, as part of the game was kind of some of these interesting problems that humans deal with as they are trying to survive. So a couple of takeaways that we took from this game. Number one, the number one thing we talked about was that a lot of times survival comes down to basic luck. And some of the students were very lucky. They were given a cup and it had a line drawn on it, and that line was at different levels. Some students' lines were very small, and some students the line was nearly at the top of the cup. So and it was completely random. I just handed them out. Boom, there we went. So there was some issues with justice and fairness, and how come their line is higher than my line? It's not fair. And so we talked a little bit about the kind of luck of survival. You're lucky to be born in the United States. You're unlucky to be born in a poor country. And then we dealt with the tools. The first activity was collecting water from a bucket and bringing it back and filling it up to that line. And the tools that were there for them to use were measuring cups and measuring spoons. You get a measuring cup, and life becomes very easy. You can fill your cup up in 1 or 2 trips. You get a measuring spoon, and it's going to take much longer to get your cup filled up, to the point where some students in some classes didn't even get finished with the water part till the very end of the game. Everyone else was finished with the entire thing. So we talked a lot about justice. We talked a lot about fairness. We talked a lot about the idea of the luck of birth. Then we talked about the second part of it was literacy. The second activity was building a shelter out of a piece of paper and some popsicle sticks. But they had to read the directions. In the directions, it said you must write the team name across your piece of paper. No one read the directions. So most of the people failed in that just simply because they didn't read the directions. We talked about how that basically means literacy and being able to read is an important part of survival. The more you can read, the more that you are educated, the easier that your life will then be. And then, of course, we talked a lot about the idea of crime. Unfortunately, human nature is such that as they were collecting their food, which were little colored pieces of macaroni out in the grass, there were green ones, which were very hard to find in the grass, there were orange ones, there were yellow ones. As students would collect those and put them on their pieces of paper to prove that they had found all of their food, other students would realize, well, they're not looking very closely at their paper, or they're all looking out hunting when they should be back at their paper, so maybe I'll just take theirs and move it over to mine, which is an interesting question that we could kind of talk about, the idea of meeting needs, even if that means committing a crime or breaking a rule. And then finally, we had an interesting conversation about loss of resources. As we went through the 4 classes that I teach, the first class had no problem finding the food. The second class, not as bad problem-wise. Third block, it was starting to get harder. And by fourth block, every single student died. None of them could find enough food. And we talked about why that might have been. And most of them realized that the little noodles were getting stepped on. And the noodles that were out in the grass were being stepped on throughout the course of the day. They stepped on them, I stepped on them, everyone was stepping on them, so they were breaking down and they were losing resources. By the time we got to fourth block, none of the teams could find enough food at all, which made it very kind of frustrating. We talked about that as 4 generations. First generation doesn't have too much trouble. They have plenty of resources. First block, no problem. Second block, not too bad. Third block, third generation, not too bad, but still a few people were dying. By fourth block, everyone's dying. You use up the resources, and your children's grandchildren are starting to lose resources. So it was an interesting conversation about that. It was rousing. It was fun. You should talk to them about it. Now, a couple of other things that are going on. First of all, I passed back this assignment here. It's called the Iceman. It has a grade on it. We talked a little bit about how that grade is a practice grade. So some students were a little upset because they got really good grades on it, and it won't count against them. or for them. Some students didn't do very well, and they were pretty excited because it won't count against them, but that will go on the report card, and it is a good conversation about how well they're working in class. So if you see a lower grade there, it might not average into their average, but it is a good indication of how well they're kind of paying attention or focusing or trying on assignments in class. If you're just seeing 100, right on. I sent out a note on the Gnomes Team website the other day about a passport stamper. We're going to create passports in the next couple of days that will look kind of very similar to passports you might have at house. And we're going to use it as a reflection tool for each unit. We're going to use that as a kind of study guide for each unit. So as we get these passports built, when the student finishes the test for that unit and does it to the right level, we want to stamp their passport in kind of a fun way of saying you've proven that you know this information. So we found some interesting passport stampers that we as a 6th grade social studies, so track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, all want to buy these. And so we're asking if you have the ability to just bring in $1, that would be great towards the cost of this overall. I do have quite a few people who've already started to bring in some money, and I thank you very much for that. And we do need a little bit more, though. So if you haven't brought in $1, that would be great if you could. Today we talked a little bit more about Kennewick Man, and I showed some pictures. We watched a little bit more video. We showed a little bit of an article from Smithsonian, which I'm going to link here because it is quite an interesting article. You might want to read it. Some of the students might want to read it. It's an interesting article. There's a little bit more in depth about who this guy is and the controversy that the Native Americans have with the bones and the government and all of those types of very interesting conversation to have about Kennewick Man. So we're going to finish Kennewick Man on Tuesday, and hopefully, fingers crossed, finish Kennewick Man, and then get into the Inca, the Aztec, and the Maya the end of next week. So that's where we're going. Hopefully you will have a wonderful, long weekend. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. See you later.
Oh my God, where's the white one, man? Where is it? Yeah, use this! Can I use this?
Yeah.
I got it!
Now you can go get food, one at a time.
We have water! We're not gonna die! Get oranges!
Carlos, what do we need? Go get our fielder guys.
Careful, careful. Don't, see, careful. Careful, careful. Being careful. Being careful. Being careful. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants. Nobody wants this. Oh, there you go, Tegan.